Hey friends, trust me, you do not want to miss this story. Shadowed with suspense, steeped in drama, and driven by a passion that borders on dangerous. Amina Clarke, a 20-year-old British exchange student from London, lands a coveted spot at Seoul's elite Hansung University. When her dorm assignment falls through at the last minute, the university pairs her with one of their top sponsors, the Kang family. On paper, the Kangs are an old money dynasty that funds scholarships and hospitals. In truth, they're the quiet power behind a massive criminal network that controls half of Seoul's underground economy. The taxi stopped at the top of a steep, curved road overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. For a moment, Amina thought the driver had taken her to the wrong place. Amina's breath fogged the window as she stared. "Are you sure this is the right address?" The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror, half amused. "Kang family. Yes, right address." Her chest tightened. She fumbled for her phone, checking the university email for the fifth time. "Due to unforeseen dormitory repairs, you will be temporarily hosted by the Kang family, university sponsors." Temporarily. That word had given her comfort earlier. Now it sounded like a warning. The house's front doors opened before she could reach them. A woman in her 50s stood in the entryway, composed, elegant, dressed in a slate-gray hanbok that managed to look both traditional and lethal. "You are Miss Clarke," the woman said in measured English. "Yes, ma'am, Amina Clarke." She bowed slightly, remembering the etiquette guide she'd skimmed on the flight. The woman didn't bow back. Her gaze skimmed over Amina's face, her natural curls, her travel-wrinkled clothes, then moved on as if filing a report. "I am Madame Kang." The air inside was warm, scented faintly of cedar and something sharper, incense maybe. Amina followed her down a long hall lined with artwork that looked expensive enough to have its own security detail. "You will stay in the East Wing," Madame Kang said. "Meals are served at 7 sharp. Breakfast at 6. We value discipline and respect for privacy here." Amina nodded quickly, trying to memorize the rules before they multiplied. As they passed a broad staircase, movement caught her eye. Someone descending, dressed in black slacks and a crisp white shirt. He was tall, lean, and carried the kind of presence that made the space bend subtly around him. Their eyes met for a brief electric second. Madame Kang's voice softened slightly. "My son, Jae-min. He is also at Hansung University. You will see him in your classes." Amina offered a tentative smile. "Hi." Jae-min's expression didn't change. "Is she staying long?" His voice was low, measured, in perfect English. Madame Kang glanced at Amina before answering. "That depends on how long the university takes." Amina felt her stomach tighten. She wasn't sure what hurt more, the question or the complete lack of emotion behind it. Jaemin's gaze flicked back to her, not lingering. "I'll have the maid prepare her room." "I can manage," she began, but he had already walked away. The guest room was minimalist. Amina unpacked slowly, the quiet pressing around her. Back home in London, she'd shared a noisy flat with 3 other girls, laughter echoing through thin walls, music blaring as they danced around mismatched furniture. Here, even the air felt expensive, sterile. She sat on the bed, rubbing her hands together. "You're here for 6 months. It's just temporary. Be grateful. Don't mess this up." A soft knock came at the door. When she opened it, Jae-min stood there, hands in his pockets. His expression hadn't changed from before, polite, distant, but his presence filled the small doorway like a shadow. "Dinner," he said simply. "Thanks," she replied. He didn't move, didn't offer to lead the way, just turned and started walking, assuming she'd follow. At the table, she found 4 places set, though only 3 were filled. Madam Kang, Jae-min, and a younger man she assumed was his cousin or brother. The food was beautiful, arranged like art. She hesitated, unsure of the protocol. Jaemin's voice broke the silence. "You wait until my mother starts." "Oh, sorry." His tone hadn't been harsh, but the cold precision of it made her shrink slightly. She caught the faintest flicker of disapproval in Madam Kang's eyes. They ate mostly in silence. Amina tried to focus on her food. Spicy, rich, delicious, but every movement felt watched, measured. When she reached for her glass, her hand brushed Jae-min's by accident. He didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened, and she withdrew quickly. Madam Kang dabbed her lips with a napkin. "Miss Clarke, in this house you will find that respect is earned, not given freely." "Yes, ma'am." By the time dinner ended, Amina's appetite was gone. That night, she couldn't sleep. The floor below her hummed faintly. Footsteps, voices in Korean, doors opening and closing. She turned her pillow over, willing herself to relax. Just as she began to drift, she heard a soft click. Her door. It opened a few inches, a shaft of light cutting across the floor. Then silence. She held her breath, frozen. The door shut again. No footsteps this time. Just the sound of a lock sliding into place from the outside. A chill ran down her spine. She stared at the door until dawn broke through the curtains. And as the first pale light filled the room, Amina realized she wasn't sure if this house was her temporary home or her new prison. The morning light over Seoul had a kind of sharpness to it, clean, metallic, like glass. Amina stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the front of her cream blouse, trying to look composed. Her eyes were still heavy from lack of sleep. The door had been unlocked when she woke. No sign of who had touched it. She'd told herself maybe it was a housekeeper. Maybe it had been locked for security. But that tiny metallic click in the dark still echoed at the edge of her thoughts. Now she forced a bright breath through her chest and grabbed her tote bag. Downstairs, Madam Kang was gone, but Jae-min stood near the door in a tailored black coat, phone in one hand. His expression didn't change when she appeared. If anything, he looked mildly surprised she was on time. "You'll be late if you wait for the driver," he said. "Come." You're driving?" He nodded once. The car was silent. No music, just the hum of the engine and the city unfolding beyond tinted glass. She glanced out the window. Seoul in daylight was dazzling. It should have felt exciting. It didn't. Not with him sitting beside her like a storm cloud. She tried to start small talk. "You've been at Hansong long?" "Yes." The clipped answer stung more than she wanted to admit. "Do you like it?" A pause. "It's useful." She gave up. The campus looked like a movie set. Modern glass buildings framed by cherry trees whose leaves were just turning. Students laughed in clusters, the rhythm of Korean chatter surrounding her. Amina followed Jae-min through the crowd, trying to keep pace. People turned to look, not at her, but at him. A few girls whispered. Someone called his name, half teasing, half awed. He ignored them. When they reached the main lecture hall, he stopped. Your classroom is there. Aren't you in? I am, but don't wait for me. He walked off before she could say anything else. Inside, the lecture room was buzzing. Dozens of faces, mostly Korean, turned toward her as she entered. Amina smiled nervously and took a seat near the middle. The professor, an older man with steel-rimmed glasses, began introducing the semester's project. Each student will be paired with another for a cross-cultural business analysis. The professor scanned the roster. Miss Clarke, you'll be with Mr. Kang Jae-min. Her heart sank. A few students exchanged glances. One of them whispered something in Korean that made the others snicker. She tried to focus on her notebook, cheeks warming. Don't read into it, she told herself. But when class ended and she turned to speak to him, Jae-min was already packing his things with brisk precision. So, when do you want to start? She asked. He didn't look up. Send me your notes tonight. I'll edit them. I thought we'd discuss. I'll handle it. The words landed sharp, like frost. Amina blinked. It's supposed to be a collaboration. He met her eyes then, just briefly, and for the first time she saw something under the surface. Then he looked away. Do as you like. He walked out. At lunch, she sat alone. The cafeteria buzzed with sound. Laughter, phones chiming, chopsticks clicking, but none of it touched her. Every time she glanced up, she caught someone looking, then looking away. She opened her messages and typed out a note to her best friend back home. Day 1. I think my host family hates me, LOL. She deleted the LOL, then deleted the whole message. Outside, she wanted to cry. The way he looked through her, like she was a problem he couldn't solve, sat heavy in her chest. That evening, when she returned to the house, the lights were low and quiet again. A meal waited on the table, untouched. Jae-min sat at the far end, reading something on a tablet. Amina hesitated. I didn't see your mother tonight. She's traveling. Oh. She sat across from him. The food was exquisite again, and tasteless. She glanced at him. About the project. I said I'd handle it. Right, but she bit her lip, then forced herself to continue. I don't need you to fix my work. I came here because I earned it. I'd like to actually do it. His eyes lifted, cold and sharp. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. Fine. Tomorrow, library. 3 o'clock. It was the first compromise he'd given her. She nodded, unsure if it was a victory or a trap. Later, alone in her room, Amina lay, staring at the ceiling. She could hear faint footsteps somewhere in the house, too many for a place this big. Every creak made her tense. But it wasn't fear that kept her awake this time. It was the memory of his eyes when he'd finally looked at her, the flicker of something that didn't fit his ice-cold facade. For the first time, she wondered if his distance was about her at all, but about something he couldn't let himself feel. The university library smelled of old paper and rain. Outside, the sky pressed gray against the glass, and Seoul's usual hum had gone quiet, as if the world were holding its breath. Amina arrived 10 minutes early. She spread her laptop and notes across the small study table, telling herself she didn't care whether Jae-min showed up. But every footstep made her look up. He arrived precisely on time, dark coat still damp, hair slightly tousled from the wind. He didn't sit until he'd scanned the room once, as if cataloging exits. "You're early," he said. "You said 3. I didn't think you'd take it literally." She bit back the retort that rose. "Some of us try to make a good impression." His eyes flicked up. "You're not here to impress anyone." Something in his tone, not cruel but absolute, made her spine straighten. "That's not for you to decide." He set down his tablet and began typing without answering. For 10 minutes, the only sounds were the soft tapping of keys and the scratch of her pen. Finally, she pushed a sheet toward him. "Here, my half of the market analysis." He took it, scanning quickly. "You used figures from last year's report." "They're the most complete data I could find." "They're wrong," he said, marking a line with his pen. "This company hides losses through shell subsidiaries." Amina leaned forward. "Then tell me how instead of just crossing it out." His pen froze. The silence between them thickened. Then he looked at her fully, not the detached glance from before, but a level, searching stare that made her pulse jump. "You shouldn't demand explanations for things you don't understand," he said quietly. "And you shouldn't assume I don't," she snapped. "I worked hard to get here, Jae-min. I'm not just some charity case dumped in your house." The words came out sharper than she meant, slicing the air between them. A few nearby students looked up. He didn't move, but his jaw tightened. "Is that what you think?" "That's what it feels like." For a heartbeat, something raw flashed across his face, gone before she could name it. He set the pen down carefully. "You know nothing about what happens in that house." "I know enough to feel unwelcome." He exhaled slowly, the sound more weary than angry. "Then, you're perceptive." She stared at him, speechless. "You're unbelievable." He stood suddenly, chair scraping. "Finish the data review. I'll handle the projections." Before she could answer, he turned towards the stacks. But halfway there, he stopped. The line of his shoulders changed, like someone remembered he'd left a door unlocked. He came back to the table, leaned down just enough so that she could see the tension in his eyes. "For what it's worth," he said, voice low, "none of this is your fault." Then he walked away. She sat frozen, the air around her still vibrating with whatever had just passed between them. When she finally looked at the page he'd corrected, she saw small notes written in the margin, neat, precise handwriting explaining every revision in detail. Not disdain, guidance. For the first time, she realized how hard he must be fighting to stay behind that wall. And for the first time, she wanted to know why. Rain followed her home. By the time Amina reached the front gate, the city lights were blurred behind a veil of water, and the Kang estate looked carved out of shadow. She shook off her umbrella in the entryway. No sign of Madame Kang. No sound except the steady hiss of rain against the glass walls. A door clicked somewhere deeper in the house. Jae-min's voice, low and controlled. "Yes, I understand." Then silence. When he stepped into the hall, his expression was unreadable again, except for the faint red mark along his jaw, as if he'd clenched it too long. He stopped when he saw her. "You walked back?" "The driver wasn't there. I dismissed him." "Right. Of course you did." Her words came out brittle. "I hope that fits whatever schedule you have for controlling everything." Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, but he only said, "You shouldn't walk alone at night." "I wasn't alone. There are people in Seoul, you know." He exhaled through his nose, the smallest sign of patience thinning. "That isn't what I meant." The air between them thickened with unsaid things, the argument in the library, the strange apology in his eyes before he'd walked away. Amina folded her arms. "Then what do you mean, Jae-min? Because every time you talk to me, it's like I've done something wrong." He looked at her for a long moment, light glinting off the sharp planes of his face. "You haven't." "Then maybe try acting like it." That broke the distance. He stepped closer, not threatening, but close enough that she could smell the faint scent of cedar. He said quietly, "You shouldn't take it personally. My family. Our house is complicated. I figured that out." His eyes darkened. "Then stop asking questions you don't want answered." Her heartbeat stuttered. "Maybe I do want them answered." He started to reply, but the phone in his pocket buzzed. One glance at the screen wiped whatever softness had been forming. Without another word, he turned away and disappeared down the hall. Later in her room, Amina tried to read but couldn't focus. Thunder rolled outside. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. Men's voices murmured in fast Korean. She caught fragments, sharp, urgent, then silence again. When she peeked through the curtain, a black car she didn't recognize idled by the side entrance. Two figures in dark suits unloaded something heavy into the garage. She stepped back from the window, pulse quickening. Footsteps sounded in the corridor, measured, deliberate. Then a quiet knock. Jae-min's voice, softer than before. "It's late. Don't go near the garage." I opened the door a crack. "Why?" His eyes held hers, steady and indecipherable. "Because I'm asking you to trust me." Before she could answer, he was gone again, leaving only the echo of rain and a dozen new questions. The rain had stopped, but the world still smelled of it. Damp earth, metal, the faint sweetness of soaked cedar. Amina woke to weak sunlight and the distant sound of footsteps downstairs. The memory of last night drifted back in fragments. The thunder, the car in the drive, Jae-min's voice outside her door. She dressed quickly, telling herself she didn't care whether he was awake or not. Downstairs, the dining room was already set. Coffee steamed beside a tray of rice, vegetables, and fish, so precisely arranged it looked ceremonial. Jae-min sat at the far end, reading through a thick folder of papers. The morning light made the bruise-colored circles beneath his eyes stand out. He didn't look up when she entered. "You didn't sleep," he said, voice flat but too accurate to be a guess. "Neither did you," she replied. A page turned. Some things don't wait for sleep. Amina poured herself coffee just to have something to do with her hands. The clink of porcelain sounded too loud. "So, last night," she began. "Don't." He said it softly, but the word carried the weight of an order. "I just want to know what you don't." He looked up then, and the mask he usually wore was cracked at the edges. There was tension there. Not anger exactly, but the brittle strain of someone who'd spent the night keeping something from breaking. Amina set the cup down. You keep saying I don't understand things, but how am I supposed to if you never tell me anything? He pushed the folder aside. Understanding isn't always safe. Safe from what? You? The question escaped before she could stop it. That made him go still. For a moment, the air between them felt charged. Not violent, just unbearably heavy. I don't want to be your problem, Jae-min, she said quietly. I just want to exist in this house without feeling like I'm walking through someone else's nightmare. His hand flexed on the table. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. You're right. What? You're not my problem. His tone softened at the edges. You're a reminder. Of what? He hesitated long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Of what normal looks like. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then he stood, gathering the papers back into a perfect stack. You'll be late for class, he said, turning toward the hall. Jae-min, she called after him. If you don't want me to ask questions, fine. But stop pretending you don't see me. He paused at the doorway. The faintest breath of a smile touched his mouth. Not mockery this time. Something closer to surrender. Then he left without another word. Outside, the sun broke through the thinning clouds. For the first time since arriving, Amina felt something shift. Not warmth exactly, but the first hint that the ice between them could melt. The afternoon sun poured through the library's glass roof, turning the dust in the air to gold. Amina sat at their usual table, spreading out printouts and highlighting passages she barely understood. The same table where they'd argued days before. She told herself she wasn't waiting for him. But when Jae-min finally appeared, black backpack slung over one shoulder, expression composed, her heart still jumped. He set his things down with his usual precision. You already started? She nodded. You were 10 minutes late. Traffic, he said. Then, after a beat, good work on the revenue analysis. It wasn't much, but coming from him, it felt like an entire paragraph of praise. Thanks, she said, trying not to sound too pleased. They fell into an easy rhythm. She typed while he reviewed figures. Their silence less strange now, more like focus than avoidance. Every so often he'd lean over to point at her screen, his sleeve brushing her arm. Neither of them pulled back quickly enough to pretend they didn't notice. For the first time, she realized how still he usually was. Every movement controlled, deliberate. Sitting this close, she could sense the effort it took for him to keep everything tidy, contained. Your English phrasing is better than mine, he said suddenly. You write the summary. You just don't want to do it. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Perhaps. The small exchange loosened something inside her chest. She risked teasing him again. So you can be human. That earned her an actual smile this time. Brief but real. Don't tell anyone. She laughed, the sound startling in the quiet library. For a few seconds, the weight between them lifted. When the professor passed by to check on their progress, he glanced at the neatly ordered pages and nodded. Excellent work, both of you. After he moved on, Jae-min said quietly, he doesn't praise easily. Then we make a good team, I said. He looked at me for a moment, thoughtful. Maybe. We packed up as the sun began to set. Outside, the campus buzzed with end-of-day chatter. I expected him to walk off as usual, but he hesitated. "Do you know where the student cafe is?" he asked. "I think so." "Show me. I've never been." Amina blinked. "You? The campus prince?" His eyebrow lifted. "Is that what they call me?" "Something like that." He let out a soft breath that might have been a laugh. "Then lead the way, Miss Clarke." They walked side by side through the fading light, conversation cautious at first, then gradually warmer. He asked about London, she asked about Seoul. Their answers were short, but honest. When they reached the cafe, it was crowded, noisy, perfectly ordinary. He looked around like someone seeing another world through glass. "Coffee?" she offered. He nodded. "Whatever you're having." As they stood in line, a group of students passed, whispering and glancing their way. She ignored it, but his shoulders tensed. "People notice you," she said lightly. "You might as well get used to them noticing who you're with." He met her eyes. "That's not something I can get used to easily." "Then start small. Coffee's a good first step." Something in his expression softened, half amusement, half gratitude. And when they sat down across from each other, mugs steaming between them, the silence was easy this time. For the first time since she'd arrived in Seoul, Amina didn't feel invisible. The next week moved too quickly. Between lectures, project drafts, and late-night library sessions, Amina almost forgot how strange it still was. Living under the same roof as Jae-min and pretending everything about him was ordinary. Almost. By Friday, the business department buzzed with talk of the upcoming cultural showcase. Every student had to represent their country or region. For Amina, it meant setting up a booth about London and Black British culture, something that both excited and terrified her. She was at the display table early, pinning photos to a board when someone called her name. "Need a hand?" It was Daniel Park, one of the exchange assistants, cheerful with an easy smile that made everyone like him. "Oh, please," Amina said, grateful. "This banner won't stay up." He held the end while she climbed a small step stool to tape it higher. "So, you're from London?" he asked. "I studied there a few summers ago. Brick Lane, right? Amazing food." She laughed. "Then you've seen more of London than I have." The laughter drew attention from across the hall. Jae-min was setting up his team's business innovation booth, sleeves rolled, precision in every motion. When his gaze found her, it didn't linger long, just a heartbeat. But his jaw tightened. When she finally stepped down, Daniel offered a steadying hand. She took it, light as a feather, but that single touch didn't go unnoticed. From across the room, Jae-min's pen snapped in half. He looked down at the ink blooming across his palm, expression muted. Then he excused himself from his group and disappeared into the corridor. Later, after the showcase wound down, Amina found him by the main stairwell. He stood half in shadow, cleaning the ink off his hand with a handkerchief, movements precise, almost ritualistic. "You left early," she said. "You seemed occupied." His tone was perfectly level, but the air around him felt charged. She frowned. "With Daniel? He was just helping." "I didn't ask," he replied, slipping the cloth into his pocket. "No, but you're acting like you want to." That caught him off guard. For a moment, the mask slipped. His eyes flicked up to hers, dark, sharp, conflicted, before he looked away. "I don't care who you talk to," he said, voice softer now. "You're free to make friends." Then why do you look like you swallowed glass? He exhaled slowly. You shouldn't read into things you don't understand. I keep hearing that, she said, stepping closer. Maybe you should start explaining instead. He turned his head toward her, and in the quiet that followed, she could hear her own pulse. There was something raw in his gaze, something he hadn't meant to show. Fear, maybe, or longing twisted tight enough to hurt. But before either could speak again, a black sedan pulled up outside the building. A man in a dark suit stepped out, scanned the hallway, and gave a single nod toward Jae-min. Instantly, his expression hardened, all softness gone. Go home, he said quietly. Who is that? She asked. Don't follow me. And then he was gone, out the door, into the car, leaving her staring after him with the growing certainty that whatever he was hiding, it had just arrived to collect him. Outside, thunder rolled again in the distance, a warning echo from the night she first saw him differently. And for the first time, Amina wasn't sure she wanted the answers she'd been asking for. Hey friends, so whose side are you on right now? Amina's or Jae-min's? Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's in store for part 2. Trust me, you don't want to miss it.